Hi, welcome to Rose Yoga, Tapping into Heart Courage. I'm your host, Veruschka. I am all about changing your mind and your body with my emotional freedom technique and mindset management work. And I've been working with women for over 15 years about healing all of their, especially their first and second chakra pain, ancestral pain, all of the experiences they've had in their life. And at the root of it, it's really about coming into balance in their feminine and their masculine and not projecting to the outside of, whatever imbalance was caused by the masculine in their lives. And in that sense, I've really witnessed in my own life healing the father wound, healing all of the pain created physically, psychologically, emotionally, with the wound of partnership and in our patriarchal society. And in that vein, I've really seen that the women who get to truly heal and empower themselves by, on a cellular level, changing their mind and their body, they get to hold the space for the masculine to start their own process, just to be held in that space of being witnessed and maybe having the safety to start um, stepping out of the ancestral confines or, the programming, the conditioning, all of that. And I've just being raised by my German grandfather, who was a war veteran. I really felt from a young age this tenderness toward the wounded masculine. And I've seen this as like um, a line through all of the work that I've done. And so recently, it's come to my attention that a sister, a beautiful priestess that I met in Ashland, Oregon, about 12 years ago, was shouting out to the men saying, "Hey, I need your help. I want to chat with you. I want to hear about what you need," and really caught my attention. And so today I'm welcoming Jumana, a wonderful priestess whose work has been a lot in the lines of my own passions. I think about 10 years ago, I took one of her womb offerings. She has a school online now and had a lot of very potent offerings on the Om site. So, Jumana, welcome. I'd love for you to introduce yourself and what you're doing right now and what led you to this open conversation.
Okay. Hey, it's great to be here. Hi, Veruschka. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'm Jumana Sophia. Some of you may know me. We're not. How Veruschka and I came together for this conversation has to do with, I founded and I hold an international women's mystery school. It's in about its 8th year. So it's been huge. There's a lot of potency being cultivated there. And it's at this moment in time that there's such a fullness in the school itself and with the women, some who've been journeying with me for the entirety of this time, that I'm aware of it starting to move towards men, like it just wants to, right? So part of the message on Facebook that found Veruschka and has found all these men came from that place of, oh, I always knew somewhere on the horizon this would move towards men. I didn't know when, and I've kind of pushed it a little too soon at different times. It feels like right now is the right time. So yeah, this open conversation that I had with the men, and it was the first, there's another one coming up, had to do with me just really I have my own sense of things. I have my own experiences and what feels alive in me to offer. But I wanted to hear from the men themselves, um, kind of beyond the normal conversation. When we're working in the arts of the priestess or working in these deeper places, we're not coming together to just have a conversation. And we're not coming together to just kind of talk about male and female dynamics. What we're coming together to do is to sit together around a common flame, around a common desire to be noble human beings and to really be closer to the mystery of how we were created to be, and to go from there and to see what arises. So yeah, we've had our first conversation and it was lovely. I've been very inspired by it. But that's how Veruschka and I have come together, is in a, I think, a shared, I like the word you use, Veruschka, tenderness, like a shared tenderness towards, for me, it's towards the journey of men's journeys. I have a son, he's 23 going on 24. I live right now with a disabled veteran, and there's just, I mean, it's been so many ways in which what I've noticed is that the deeper I've gone into real deep feminine cultivation and purification and, remembrance, actually, the more I have a deep love for men and a deep also need, and I was talking to the men about this, that what I notice in myself and in the women who go through the school and in other women who are cultivating, this presence inside of themselves, we don't ever, there's not this place that you get to where you're all of a sudden totally independent and you don't need men. It's different. The desperation wears away, and the control and the manipulation, particularly the desperation though, and that starts to fall away. But that deep need and the deep that yearning towards what only the men can bring, the initiations that only they can bring, the kind of medicine that only they can bring, only gets kind of more beautiful in a way. And when I was talking to the men, the way the school holds it anyway is that, we are deeply in service. So when we cultivate all that it is to be potent, to hold deep feminine presence, we do that in service to everyone, and that includes our brothers. So those are some of my initial thoughts, Veruschka.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm curious about like how when we tap into our, our program masculine, just in probably the generation that you and I both grew up, where we might have had single mothers and the mother had to overcompensate for playing both genders and energies, and sometimes the feminine does the patriarchy better and can be more dangerous than the masculine, and like when I've done the women's work, I have them kind of gauge, what percentage do you feel like is masculine? What percentage is feminine, that in your essence? And most women are like log in at 80% masculine, to really, and it's shocking just in our, capitalistic society that we can't afford to rest. We can't afford to practice being the feminine, to relax and receive. And it's a big theme right now over the last few years, thankfully. Around the self-love and nurturing and self-care. But how do you feel like men could approach connecting with their essence? Like how do you think are examples for them to tap into their feminine?
Interesting. Well, that's actually one of the questions that's on my mind. I mean, in a way, one of the things that I feel pretty strongly about is that we as women can't actually tell men or what it is to be a good man. Where they need it from their brothers, and I think similarly, I have a lot of reverence for the specificity of our experiences, what it is to be an incarnate woman and all the mysteries that come with that, what it is to be an incarnate man, all the mysteries that come with that, and the fact that we hold those separately, the way that women go into find their depths and attune their beings and find their way is, I think, different by necessity if they're going to be fully incarnate as they were created to be. So in some ways, I mean, I have thoughts, partly that's what I'm interested in exploring, because essentially what I'm going to do is open to priestess these men, you know, whoever feels called, and to see then, you know, all right, what I've been leading the women through and how I've been holding the women, what happens or how does it unfold when that is turned towards men? So it's interesting. I have some thoughts. I've had a couple of men go through the school, and you know, for one it worked out, but it was because his partner was in the school, and so she was, you know, they were in it together. For the other one, it didn't really land, and that was a learning for me. I was like, oh yeah, right, these are women's mysteries. And so what I've seen over time is that the way that it serves the men, like the women's mysteries serve the men by serving the women, who then change and bring that to the men in their lives, right? It hasn't been a direct connection. Um, so I am interested though in what the direct connection should be, right? I've led men through practices in the school, and there are things that are true for all of us. Like, okay, come back down and in. That's the most simplest thing. Like, just take a minute, stop reaching forward, stop pushing forward, stop penetrating, and come back down and in so that something can actually come towards you. You know, this is also how to elicit from a woman something that's deeper inside of her. So I'm going a lot of different directions, but yeah, you know, there's in the simplest way, I would say that, you know, it's for us as women to go as deeply as we can into our capacities, and then to watch what that elicits in the men around us. You know, there's it feels like a very sensitive threshold, because any man who isn't emasculated and isn't willing to be emasculated won't be told what to do, right? They won't want our agenda coming onto them. I mean, that's just, I don't want anybody's agenda coming onto me. And so there's this way in which it's such a subtle dance, because this dance of eliciting, right, which is a deep feminine way, is to elicit the king, elicit nobility, and elicit it without through influence and not control, right? So those are a couple of my thoughts on it, and I'm interested to see how that does. You know, I'm interested to, as I come into more direct connection with the men, I'm interested to see just what works for them, you know, and that's been what these conversations are about. And then what the offerings will be about is like, all right, what works? Let's discover it together. You know, there is a meeting place between men and these mysteries of women. Where is it? Where is that right place? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like what you said about illicit, because we don't really have that language even in our day-to-day communication, you know, of like what it means to have a call and response with each other that's not like domineering or commanding or assuming and judgy. And you know, the one word I've been using a lot is just like modeling, just modeling being in the essence of like, I'm a safe person, I trust you, and you know, I'm welcoming, I'm inviting more, but I'm not going to demand it. So I'm going to model it in a way that may or may, you know, not in a like planned or, you know, uh manipulative way, but you know, that leaves room for that flow. I was just reflecting that you know, sometimes we're born to be these change makers. You know, when I reflect on my upbringing, I was raised by my dad, who was really young during a period of time from like 5 till 7, where it was just all of the dudes hanging out, you know, hanging out, partying. So it's like all these 23, 25-year-old hippies, right, on Malibu Beach. And so I had to, as the only girl there, you know, I had to learn to hang out with them and receive their form of love, of like poking fun, making fun of me, tickling me, joking, and having to take, like, that was their expression of love. But as a result, like, I feel like my whole life I've had You know, I love my sisters. I'm a loyal Leo. Like I've always had best friends, girls, but I've also been very comfortable in the company of the masculine, you know, and offering this work for the last 15 years, you know, I've really put in the focus on hashtag divine masculine rising, you know, because knowing that's the work we need to do in order to see change, in order to have the mirror in our life, you know. And that's what I really like to bring to the women is instead of complain, you know, when I had a really good, my last really good long-term relationship, I love the fact that I was never calling a girlfriend going, oh my God, can you believe he did this and this? Or I can't believe he's not blah, blah, blah. And I just love the liberation that there was nothing for me to complain about to anyone. And I was like, okay, this is new. And so you kind of timestamp and acknowledge what is working. And so I really brought this essence of like, celebrate the masculine doing the things where you're like, oh, Polaroid moment, like click. I love that this person is actually asking me a question, showing curiosity, holding the door open, bringing flowers, being thoughtful. You know, I pride myself in the day where, you know, I'm living on the big island in the middle of nowhere. No one ever calls, people just text. But on one day, I had 3 calls from the masculine, and they each cried to me about something in their life, whether it was vulnerability, joy, gratitude, pain. And I was like, wow, I'm so grateful I get to be that witness to men feeling safe to have tears with me, like that they know I'm that person, and just like validating, like, okay, mark this moment, like I'm this person that is in this unconditional love, that they feel safe. And so what I wanted to bring that to was just what I've known in the growth of my connections with the masculine and relating is changing the stereotypical paradigms of, you know, telling them what to do, not to do, you know, to realize, okay, from my childhood, I know that they just want to hang out. They want to feel safe to lounge, be themselves. And instead of telling them what to do or judging them, you ask questions. You know, the 4 agreements really have served me in the don't make assumptions, you know, be impeccable with your word, always do your best. Um, but my point is like that is a tool for communication. Like how can the awakening feminine use these tools, right, to like create new conversations by showing curiosity. And yeah, that just came to mind, is just the feminine needs to also overhaul like how they've been acting. Like that's not working anymore for men, you know.
Right.
And yeah, so I'd love to hear, like, if you want to share a personal story of when you realized that something that was going on with you, that you needed the masculine to
Oh,
initiate you.
that I needed them. Oh, right. I mean, there's been several, most recently, and this is what I wrote about when I shared about this conversation. When I just kind of, I just overhauled my entire life. I left Ashland and my band. I didn't know where I was going. It was a big life change. My son left for school, and one of the, I was just listening. I mean, it was literally prayer after prayer. Okay, show me. Okay, show me. And at one point, what I heard was the brothers are coming. The brothers are coming. And I was like, all right, I hear you. What's happening is that the men are coming now. And um, I went through a lot, you know, kind of finally having time to myself. I'd been a mostly single mother and provider. And so all of a sudden it was like my son was launched and all the feelings came. You know, I mean, it was hard. It was really hard because there was regret, and it was just like everything had happened so fast. And so I was in this kind of intense state and alone on the road. And again, when I prayed, you know, the answer was, you know, your sisters aren't going to be able to help you with this. This is something the men can help you with, but Your sisters won't be able to. And that was clear. So I called my brother, and my brother is part of Mankind Project. He has a Mankind Project circle, long-term circle that he's been gathering with, and they welcomed me to their circle. I think I was only the second woman to ever sit in their circle, and they held that for me. And they really, it was only men could have given that to me. And what it was the transition between me as the mother of a young son into me facing my son as the man he'd become. And somehow that had to come from men. I mean, I've had other personal initiations, through relationships or through birthing and raising a son, tons of initiations there. But that felt significant to me in terms of it was a ritual initiation. And so much of where I've received that is through my sisters, and so to really be, yeah, it was a profound experience. It was mutual for them to be able to witness a mother going through that, kind of crossing that threshold was really powerful for them. Um, and then since then, I mean, it was a rough journey, and at a certain point, I was like, "Oh, tell me where to go." She's like, "Go to the ocean, go to the ocean." And so that as soon as I got out of my van, my path crossed with a man who's a Marine vet and a warrior, like a seasoned warrior who's had to resurrect himself multiple times. And same, there have been so many. What he brings to me as a man who's been initiated that deeply is it's like I've never experienced anything like it, and I needed it. Like I needed it to balance my own system, to just it's like all my blind spots, everything. So I think there's kind of there are many ways. There's the standard ones. Oh, men can initiate us sexually. They can initiate us, through marriage. They can initiate us through pregnancy. There's a lot of things that obviously they give on those levels, but I think my recent experience has been that there are a lot more ways in which we could be initiating each other. Um,
And can you be specific on how they're showing up and how it's giving you? Is it like being seen? Is it validation? Is it a mirror for them of like having had to release their own mothers when they became a man? Like what are some examples of what you are receiving?
what I've received from them. Um, I mean, what I would say is, for me, there's a certain amount of, I mean, what comes to me at the moment is that they are my big purifiers. They are the place where I actually feel like I can be held the most accountable. And that's interesting, right? So it hasn't been like, oh, almost like I feel like I was set up for like, oh, and this is true. It's wonderful to be seen by a man. It's wonderful to be held. It's all of that has its own quality to it. But there's been a certain way in which I have felt like I have craved the kind of accountability that men can hold for each other and that they hold for themselves that I needed as a woman. Like I needed to, I mean, I have a long-term history of falling in love with men and then just basically kind of entrapping them in my fantasy, for instance. Like my fantasy of what they could be, of what I want them to be, and it's not even mean. It's not even, whatever it is, it was just been unskillful, but it's a long history. And it's been damaging to both of us, right? So a lot of what I've been receiving over the past year is just a consistent refusal to engage in my fantasy, right? And what that does is, it's hard to describe, when you're living in something like that, but it's like, oh, there it is again. And oh, like this is when I'm with a very empowered man, what happens is he won't hook into any of my things. So I'm actually freed by it, right? But it's a burn. you know
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
burn. I call it the clean bleed. There's a way in which And I'm speaking in a way from, my time with my friend here, where he is a truly initiated warrior. He's an initiated man. And that means that he won't manipulate. There's something he's claimed inside of himself that just disallows me from being with anything other than the truth, if that makes sense. So I feel like that's something actually interesting that's been.
And to be clear, is this a romantic connection or
No, not
a
necessarily.
platonic?
We're like road companions. We've had I mean, there's a soul contract for sure, and there's it's like I describe it as like the most masculine man you can imagine, and me, pretty seriously feminine, kind of being brought together to see how that goes, and all the ways in which that can be kind of amazing and the natural harmonies that are there. Um, I mean, how else do I feel like what I've been receiving? I mean, it's funny, I was working with a health coach one time and she was talking about working with a ton of women. And I was saying, like, yeah, I'm working with all these women. She's like, look, I want you to remember that if you work with a ton of women all the time, at a certain point, it'll get deranged. She's like, you need to have men. And I understand what she was talking about. They are so grounding. That's also something I feel like I deeply receive from men. They are so grounding. Like, there's a way in which, probably partly because they're not cycling like we are. They've got this, they have something that I think is like a ground underneath of the kind of cyclical, changing, constant transformation that women are in, essentially. And when we don't resist it and the way that it shows up, like it's more grounded, it's less flowery. It's all the things that it is when we don't resist it and try to make it into ourselves, then it really serves, you know. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, like when
I
I'm
can
bleeding,
relate.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I was just saying
Well,
when I'm bleeding, the thing I love the most is for a man just to put his hand on my body. And it's not, and it isn't the same as a woman putting her hand. It's a really, truly, it's such a grace,
it's
but
like the red tree, right? Just leaning into the tree.
right.
Yeah. I
Anyway,
just wanted to resonate that I had an experience kind of recently of living on the mountain here off grid with a house, a landmate with the masculine, and just doing, just sharing space, but doing the daily chores, the groundedness in the earth, just the chop wood, carry water. And yeah, it was a place that was really looking in the mirror every day, all day, of just holding myself accountable and just like, having that groundedness, but the again, the showing up and hands-on experience of just life with the earth, growing food, building, and not having a definition, but knowing, fully aware, this is like the masculine and feminine are being paired in the middle of nowhere to
right,
anchor in this energy into the earth.
right.
There, without the stories, the agendas, me trying to make them something they're not, or vice versa. So I can, just reflecting, I recognize the energies you're speaking of.
Yeah, it's a little alchemy. It's an unexpected kind of alchemy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to hear about some of the responses or what you learned from that last open call with the men. Of
Yeah.
like, did they speak their needs? I was, I shared your event, and I was actually surprised that two men actually made comments underneath my post saying, "Oh, I want to go to this." I was like, wow, because even if they wanted to, I don't know if I wanted to share that publicly like they did.
Right, right. Yeah, the gathering was really sweet. A fair handful of them were men who know women who've been in the school and who've been impacted by their experiences in the school and have kind of come to respect me or trust me just through, how they've experienced the women changing and coming into themselves and healing. So that was, I mean, that was sweet to receive, just period. Um, Yeah, I mean, what all did we share? It was interesting because as I came to the call, I had all these ideas of how I should maybe focalize it. And right before it was like, oh no, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to tell them, basically what we're doing and then ask them why they came. Why did you come? A lot of them came because of having connected to me slash deep feminine through the school. It felt like that there was a theme around actual depth. These were all men who they were yearning for depth. They are yearning for depth in their relationship with the feminine. So the fact that it was deep feminine and what that is, which means soulful, which means, has a capacity cultivated, that was what was drawing them. And also a lot of what was drawing quite a few of them is that they'd done men's work. So they'd been in men's groups or men's rites of passage, but there's a gap there. There's been a gap. So they do that, and then there's a question of like, well, how do I even bring this back to my woman? How do I almost like there's an invisible bridge that hasn't been made yet between the two. So there was a lot of interest in that, just kind of being brought into closer proximity with deep feminine principles and being escorted a little bit from their own mysteries into contact with women who are also cultivating themselves. What we ended up kind of centering around at a certain point was the rite of the sacred marriage, which is a pretty big, it's a pretty big thing that's held in the school, but meaning, um, in the rite of the sacred marriage, basically, this is Beltane. This is the kind of the high holy day of fertility and renewal of covenant with the earth. And there are, people go out and they make love in the fields, right? Men and women go and they make love in the fields. It's free. It's a celebration and a sanctification of, all right, this is one of the beautiful things that we do, and it's part of the life of creation. But then there's also, a priestess who has cultivated her being, and a man who has cultivated his being, and he will become king, and he becomes king through union with the priestess and anointing there, and is given the right to rule through the body of a woman. But both of them cultivated and in more of a kind of container. So that came up, and what it seemed to speak to, which I think is something that people, maybe men in particular, kind of work with, is this dichotomy of, because it went towards sexuality in this case, but the nobility of sexuality. And I think that my sense is that there is this conflict, the need to be expressive and erotic and free and being normalized and naturalized in sexuality as a man, all this, and then also the need to go deep, right? That calling that calls beyond that, which isn't bad, but it just is what it is. It's just making love in the fields, right? It is what it is. And this calling towards the bridal chamber, the calling towards sexuality, towards relationship with the feminine, towards a life that actually elicits nobility from them and calls them to really rise up. Like that was really clear, I felt like, in the men. It was not like a clear desire, a clear calling, which was beautiful to hear and witness. I don't think that gets, I mean, I've done my fair share recently of paying attention more than I ever have to all the stuff that's going on out in the world and the way people are and the way that the overculture is. And it's like, wow, this is not being spoken to at all. There is no acknowledgement of the actual holiness of the covenant between man and woman. There's all this like rhetoric, and there's all these, kind of the jockeying for power, and everybody's really into their thoughts and their, whatever, but there's not really what I felt was present was actually a deep desire to connect that relationship to the soul and to have some
Mhm.
skillful means in relationship to that, you know. Um,
Like the visual that I've been having very predominantly the last year is just the kiss, whether you want to have the image of Gustav Klimt's The Kiss, you know, of just the man holding, or just like the essence of what is a kiss. It's like two energies mutually coming and making that connection. Like there's not a power over, but it's like the freedom of choice to connect. And then that union, like that first kiss is like, has that energy of electricity and innocence and passion, like the mystery. It's like you're committing, but you're also taking a risk, you know, like a risk and following that passion, that spark of passion. But to me, just whatever that energy holds, like I feel like what you were just describing really mirrors that. And yeah, what I also thought about was how in our country we just don't have initiations, you know, rites of passage. And I definitely was shown through spirit like a decade ago of, you know, working with people with emotional freedom technique. Usually any of their issues go back to childhood. And then they realize when they like discover that initial wound, and I'm just speaking, I mean, this is for men and women too, but I'm speaking about the men, like when they realize like, oh, I've never actually at that early experience, I've never really matured beyond that. Like part of me felt so unsafe that I just wanted to stay this Peter Pan character, and I didn't really want to grow up. And it's been beautiful to witness times when I've had the opportunity, like whether the men were in their 30s, 40s, 60s, that they were ready in that moment to have a rite of passage, you know, just being guided in a visual to make that little boy safe and choose to be a man, because whatever they saw, they're like, I'm not ever going to be a man. That is way too unsafe, you know. And just like a woman to be able to hold that space for a man to choose to have his own rite of passage. So if men only knew like what power they could hold to hold that space for women too, you know. And in a way, this sounds like this chapter you are going through right now, or just experience, was like a rite of passage for you.
For sure, big time. And that really needed men to take me over the threshold, you know, that was theirs to do. Um, yeah. And you know, I think there is this way in which we are being invited into this kind of, you know, there is a vulnerability there, obviously, but it's like, no, we need each other. Like, can we just sit that on the table and be like, you know, this is actually true. We're not gonna make it without each other. We need each other. But then to ask in what ways actually, you know, and to start peeling off all the layers of desperation, control, you know, all the things, and really just come together as sovereign beings. But that requires a lot of cultivation, a lot of personal cultivation. And you know, when I think of an initiated human, whether an initiated woman or an initiated man, you know, there is always, it requires a certain amount of personal death. It's like there's a way in which, unless we've gone through our personal initiations as women initiate through, you know, one way is through birth, you know, where death is always right there. You know, men crave, I watched my son do this. It's like he craves the edge. And I could tell it was because he was looking for that place where death would just be close enough, because it would elicit something from him. Like he needed it. And I think that's a lot of what's happening for men. Probably why a lot of them are dying young, you know, is that it is an instinctual need to be initiated in that way. Um, so yeah, you know, that's a lot of what's on my mind. And I felt like actually in that conversation that I had with the men, a lot of them felt initiated. You know, there was a certain amount of a lot of illusions about themselves you could tell had already been stripped away. You know? So they were actually available to life, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the two friends that showed interest, they definitely have told me that they have been extremely humbled by life.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they've had these initiations. I'd love for you just to share maybe some hands-on pointers for the women right now of like what you've learned of just like, what do your masculines in your field need, whether they're your son or partnership or family or, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is to understand our role and like the power that women have to amplify and to, you know, literally acknowledging is really simple, but it's like there's a way in which the constant kind of attunement to acknowledging where there's presence, where there's love, where there's something given. There's like what I feel the masculine really craves is honor. Like they need to be honored. And it can't be held out here. It can't be like, well, when you get here or when you get here or when you become this kind of man, you know, it's like to track that and to nourish that, to be aware of nourishing and supporting and fortifying that is in them, that is honorable, that gives, that is, you know, worthy of respect. And to I mean, you know, one of the things that I think we all have to be, I mean, criticism will kill everything. It doesn't do anything ever, ever, you know, and I think that that's for me, that's one of the things. It's like, look, just remember that criticism doesn't ever get anybody anywhere. It only kills things. It only makes it harder. And
Fosters the divide. Yeah.
right. Um, the other thing, you know, is that and I was talking to the men about this. Through my journey with men, I've come to this statement for myself, which is like, look, if it's not freely given, I don't want it. And to just really sit in that. And to because it's a way of having a deep agency in our own beings, you know, freeing ourselves from grasping and from, you know, and also freeing ourselves to be like, look, I don't want anything other than what's true. I just whatever's true is what I want because I want to be in relationship to the truth. So if it's not freely given, I don't want it. And I feel like there's an energetic shift in there where that kind of pressure that men can feel. You know, and everybody when they're under pressure, they kind of collapse a little bit. I mean, everybody does that. Either that or they fight, right? So it's like to just come into a place and be like, look, if you don't want to give it, I don't want it. That's really true. So what would you like to give? What's true? Okay, and now here is what's true from me. Almost more of like that's the exchange we're looking for, not some idea about how relationships are supposed to go or who's supposed to, you know, it's just all right, well, this is what's true. Here's what's true. You know, and the the other thing that I feel like I was like, oh, if men and women together shared this commitment, it would really work out, which is I will make myself worthy of that which is worthy of me. This kind of like, look, and I think it's real good medicine for women because one of our subtle and kind of insidious shadow pieces is entitlement, right? Like as if we're entitled to all these things, which we're not, you know, nobody's entitled to anything. So it's like, well, okay, what if we just said like, okay, fine, fine. I'll tell you what, I'm going to make myself worthy of that which I believe is worthy of me and keep the focus there, right? Because that's how we elicit what we really deserve or you don't get anything because you just want it,
Yeah.
right? So
Right. And
there's
it's like the law of attraction, right? It's not like, oh, they're going to fill my hole, all my lacks. It's more like, oh, this is what I want in life from the opposite sex, then I have to be that, right?
exactly right because that's the reciprocity. That's the only way that anything happens like that. um yeah, sometimes I feel like, I mean, I can speak in my own life and a little bit just observing, women around me is it's like there's a lot of really high ideals being put out for men, like really high, and they are impossible, and it's not fair. And it means that everybody loses the experience of actually loving each other. It's like and I understand where it comes from. There's a certain heartbreak that happens for women, or there are ways in which you feel mishandled, or all the things. I mean, they're for real, but the pendulum swings then to the other side. And that's when we cross over to entitlement, right? And it kind of suffocates love. It prevents it from happening, from coming towards us. So,
It's like you're locking yourself out of that, of the potentiality.
yeah,
What you were saying about the what what's freely given. That's so been my message too, of where, you know, on the dating scene, whenever there's a guy that's just in it to, you know, is a player that's not really seeing the person. They're just like, enter a female here, and then I always get the song, you know, if you could communicate it with songs. I would always hear the song, It's a Shame, Such a Shame. I'm like, oh, you know, no, they're just some douche, you know. And then I ask her, I'm like, well, what's the song where I'm going to know that they are freely, genuinely in this? And it was Bryan Adams, Run to You. I'm
Uh,
gonna run to you. Because to me, like, when the feeling's right, I'm gonna run. Because you know that they are out of their free choice
right.
making that free decision, and I haven't heard that song yet.
Right. But one day you will.
Yeah, but that's so, it's so mirrors exactly what you were just describing.
Well, it's a really deep level of self-respect, right? Where you basically say, like, look, I will no longer build my life on foundations that aren't true. You know, I won't set myself up for failure anymore or set other people up for failure anymore. And there's a burn in that because you know, you have to sit with the truth. And you know, and I think, you know, this is why I've felt like, okay, well, the biggest way probably I'm ever going to serve men is just through holding the school, because the reality is that if women don't have a place with women to restore deep feminine essence and power and remember together how we actually work, you know, how our magic actually does work. If we don't have that, it's real hard, like really hard, because we're not full. And we don't have anything to rest back into when whatever's happening on the outside. So it's kind of like, I guess that would be my other piece for women is like, you know, wherever it is, just remember that you are a reservoir. And if you don't keep filling the reservoir, it will run dry. And out of that dryness will come desperation and reaching and all the other things. You know, those are all kind of symptoms of not really having that, you know, being dry, being tired, being desperate, you know, not getting what you need. And, you know, in the school, a lot of what we work with is like, okay, what are all the ways that you can get what you need, regardless of what's going on outside of you? And that to me is crucial. Like, we have to know as women how it is that, how are you going to feel ravished? How are you going to feel cherished? How are you going to feel safe, regardless of what's being given on the outside? Because that is actual, that's resource, you know, and that's what then allows us to open to the exchanges, those exchanges with someone from the outside. But you know, it's not like we ever fulfill that need entirely just in our own being, but if we have that cultivation, like I said, it kind of unburdens all the desperation and all the things that are on top of a really sacred need, which is a sacred need to be in union, you know. um but it's such a high art. Like, it's so simple in one way. It's so simple and so natural, but real union is like a high art. It requires skill and it requires cultivation, you know, and it requires us having, you know, at least for women, like a sisterhood
Mm-hmm.
that is,
A
you know,
lot of different foundations that we have to build for ourselves. And yeah, I appreciate your skill and labor and fine tuning in the way that you have dissected these energies, and that has taken your commitment, you know, to your craft and your purpose. And I just want to send you appreciation, and that someone is having even this recognition of like, okay, these women are doing it wrong. Not, you know, I mean, we're going to do it wrong until we can't do it wrong anymore, right? It's going to take that trial and error for however long it takes. And I really appreciate you like voicing like the entitlement and all these things, because we have to stop putting it on the others or have false expectations that don't really even hardly exist, you know?
yeah, and I
So
get it.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're having another opportunity to have an open conversation with the
Yeah,
masculine.
yeah, we're on the February the 3rd, Saturday, the February the 3rd. at 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to have another open conversation with the men. And these are free calls they're gathering, and it's really very safe. They're very sweet. It's very open. And yeah, I'm going to have another one of those, and then I'll be actually, there's some things I'm feeling coming to actually offer the men. I mean, I know that a lot of women, it's funny, when I did the first call, a handful of women reached out and they were like, "Can we join too? Because we really want to hear." And I was like, "No, you can't, because right. I need to hold
Yeah.
this as a, I could tell that it wasn't quite the right thing. But if you or anyone watching wants to kind of stay in touch with that as a woman, just get on the newsletter list. You can do it on the Mystery School website, and something will be coming that's either, whether it's just like a conversation where I share what I'm learning or whatever, but I do want to open that because I feel like it is, and I think you spoke to this too when your friends were calling you when you were on the Big Island. It's precious. Like, I'm aware that when I'm sitting in that council with these men and they are actually opening themselves, that's precious. That's really rare, and it's something that women really crave, right? But it's not that often that there's a container in which that's given. So yeah, both those things
Yeah,
are really.
and can you also voice right now what exactly what you're asking them in, or what this offering is?
The men's council, it's really just to basically say, hey, you know, here's who I am, here's what I hold. And, I mean, there are videos people can watch. There's all sorts of ways, but is there a calling? Are you interested in, the question in a way is like, look, do for the brothers, are they interested in exploring what it is to be in relationship to a deep feminine woman and deep feminine presence? That is something. It's not, not all women carry it, and at all, right? And there isn't. Right. So I guess that's the simple question is, does that draw you? And if so, come. And then tell me what it is that you imagine that would be, or where the pain is, or what the question is, or partly I'm listening and I'm getting to know the men a little bit. And then also I'm listening here for what wants to come, so it's helping me just even feel what wants to be, because the body of the school right now, I mean, it's got 3 years of advancing curriculum, it's got hundreds of women there, it's like it's full, and it's just waiting, it's like I'm waiting that it's going to be drawn forward what is for the men, but I kind of need them in the field to do it, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate how this body of work that comes through us, isn't expressed in different ways. And so we'll have the links in the comments about how to connect with Jumana and her mystery school and online classes, and also ways to stay in touch about what is going to be birthed out of this deep listening. And also, on that note, I wanted to announce that I have on my calendar for the month of March, I kind of have my offerings in 1 month programs, so people can have a 4-week process of doing self-inquiry and then clearing the emotional signatures and beliefs of tapping. So in March, I have for the women called Womb Roar, which is all about clearing first and second chakras, energy signatures of pain and trauma. And then in April, Alchemical Union, which is a unisex offering for both men and women. And so far, it's been the majority. It's been 90% women, 10% men. But it's beautiful place in that container, like in the private Facebook group, for people to witness each other, for them to out themselves and say, these are the feelings I have, because then we realize that we're not so different, And yeah, I just really, this is timeless. This is timeless material that both you and I are have to share. It's evergreen. So I'm just hoping that where people are in their pain bodies right now in life, that they realize that no one's going to come do it for them. So I'm so grateful that your school is out there as a resource, and you've got lots of different things to choose from. So thank you. Any last parting words?
Thanks, Veruschka. I think just, what's mostly with me is that I feel that there is like a holy covenant between men and women, and I feel like we know what it is. We just, it just needs to be unburdened. It's not far. It's not, there's I think all of us can have this sense of being exiled, or, there's been an interruption in our knowing of certain things, but it never went anywhere. So to be in this remembrance together, I think is, it's a huge gift. And one of the things I was me and the men were talking about is like, wow, somehow actually this is really important in the face of everything that the world is facing and going through. Like as crazy as that all is, and as like intimate as this is also somehow the seed of new life. Of course it is, right? So, um, yeah, so I do find what I left the call with the men with was hope. I was like, oh, look at that. I feel hope. I didn't know what I would feel, but I was like, whoa, that's a nice feeling to have. I'm not sure I have it very often. Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, wow. That's a perfect note to end on. I have the goosebumps right now. I really feel that energy signature popped up. I've never really had a relationship with the word hope, and more like trust and faith, but hope just feels like, you're just going to get disillusioned, disappointed anyway. But I feel like that has been like the anchoring heaven on earth word right now. So yeah, thanks for bringing that in.
Thanks for